Good Monday morning. This is the Monday. Good Monday morning. This is the Monday right after Christmas. So it's the feast, the 28th. Okay. Now you know and I know that this is actually Saturday. Okay. This is the day I make these things. I just got done saying mass here on the dinner table. Lily's my choir. She was snoring on the red chair. I got a story about her. We won't go into any of that. Anyway, today's the feast of the Holy Innocents. You know, it's really interesting. You watch the dynamic of the church, and sometimes I got to say, forget about it, but sometimes their wisdom is obvious. Sometimes it's not so obvious, okay? You got to look for it a little bit, and not this one. No sooner after Christmas than you get the next day, which is today, let's say the 26th, okay? You get Stephen Martyr. Then you get the feast of St. John the Evangelist, the 27th. Okay? The wisdom of John the Evangelist. See? You can't beat that. He's the one that gives you the great portraiture of Mary standing at the foot of the cross. You can't beat that symbolization. You can't beat that. The church is not fooling around. When she sees the Christmas holiday, and it's gloriously beautiful, and it's intensely warm family time, she also reminds you of the finitude of life, and that it is transformed. The birth of Christ is transformed all of life from birth into death, and that's why you have to have Good Friday. She reminds us with that, but giving us the martyr the next day. And then on the 28th, even the suffering of the innocent who did nothing but breathe, okay? Get born and breathe. The suffering of the innocents of the world who fill up those things wanting in the suffering of Christ. That is St. Paul with a vengeance. The suffering of the innocent is unavoidable. To look that in the eye, not to look away from the suffering of the innocent, but to look at it square, both in two ways. One, with a resolution, the resolute desire to prevent the suffering of the innocent, the unborn, the innocent, children of poverty of spirit as well as fact, financial, whatever. But also to look at redemption, the transformative power of the cross, that even the suffering of the innocent is not ultimately vain, not mere passage into the oblivion of yesterday, but into the eternity of tomorrow, the eternity of tomorrow, the paradisal tomorrow. That's the truth. The church reminds us of that. She gives us Stephen Martyr on the 26th, but she gives us the Holy Innocents, the true suffering innocent of this world. Stephen Martyr, anyway, if we speak Italian to you a little bit here, he had it coming. He ran his mouth at the wrong time in the wrong place in front of the wrong guys. He fulfilled the gospel. He was courageous in his faith, okay? But he got whacked, okay? There was nothing courageous about those little innocents. They were just born at the wrong time in the wrong place in the wrong moment. And they were expendable for the protection of the vain Herod. You see? He started to run scared. He was protecting his ass. His kingly ass, which wasn't worth it. He would have been obliterated in history if it wasn't for Christianity. The only reason he's even remembered is because of this, or else he isn't worth the time of even knowing to spell his name. He's just one more instance of the vanity of life. But the innocents are eternally remembered in the liturgy and in the remembrance of the church and in eternity. Right? That's the feast. That's why the church does these things. She reminds us of the eternal value of human suffering because of the passion and death of Christ. It's not Christmas, it's Easter. Easter makes Christmas Christmas. Without Easter, Christmas is noble and beautiful and pretty, but it's inadequate. It's incomplete. The suffering of the innocents and death has to be overcome. See? And it's overcome on Good Friday, when the church is born out of the side of Christ. And on Easter Sunday, when the great revelation occurs, that Christ is triumphant over death, alienation, sinfulness, loneliness. You can't have Christmas without Easter. But once you have Easter, then Christmas is glorious. See? And also, let's not take away Santa Claus. He's a good guy. Yes. I want to say one final word of whatever this is worth. For many of us, Christmas is difficult because it's bittersweet. It's sweet for sure, but it's bittersweet because there's also the memory of loss. By the time you're as old as I am, 80 years old almost, pushing 80, you have buried some of the most important and beautiful people of your life, the most integral and intimate people of your life, your family, your parents, your uncles, your aunts, but the people who've walked this life with you, those who are intimate to your story. You see, so many. The beauty of saying Mass by myself on Saturday mornings like this is that I'm not this, in a sense, in the church, St. Mark's, where I'm obviously conscious of the people in front of me, obviously. Some won't go back 50 years. But here alone, I'm in front of my photographs. I'm in front of the people, both alive and dead. An entire history of life. My narrative is on that table. My narrative is in the walls, on the pictures on the walls, and the gifts that are surrounding me that can go back my entire life in some ways, very much my entire life. This picture of my father and another guy, I don't know who he is, he's shooting maybe they're both handling their shotguns, and they got a bird dog. I think that's Sparkplug, my father's dog, Sparkplug. I may be wrong about that. I'm not wrong about the picture. And that picture goes back into the 30s, see, long before I was born. But it captures the sacrament of his life. And right alongside that picture, on the mantle, is his shotgun. Now, it's a shotgun, it's a weapon, okay? It's not. It's a sacrament of my father's life. If you knew the whole story of that shotgun, and it's not because it's historically important, it's because it's intimately important. It was a symbol of my father's relationship to me. We went out hunting together, you see. My father loved us in his own way. He wasn't a huggy guy, but he was faithful. God, he was faithful. He taught me what love is. Both my parents did, not by hugs and kisses, but by pure fidelity. That's a true story. I'll give you one more. When that shotgun comes in, I'll leave you alone. Back in the 60s, right after I got ordained, 69, they were rioting in New Haven. I don't want to be so racist or anything. You just got to know the story. Okay, and our neighborhood was African American, black, Puerto Rican, Italian American, but it was mostly Puerto Rican and black, and there was a lot of rioting in our area. A lot. It was a dangerous place. And the pastor of our church got beat up badly by a couple of black fellas. Okay, you got to be honest, okay, or you don't get the story. I said Mass this morning. It was a weekday morning, probably a Saturday, or like today. And as I was leaving the church, I had the chalice with me that my folks gave me. And as I left the church and I walked toward the car where my father was and mother, there was an African-American man standing there. He was standing right in the way. I had to go walk by him because it was all fenced-in area. Okay, so I had to go right to him. And I did. I wasn't afraid of anything, but I did know what was going on in our neighborhood. It made national news. It was a very important, very sad killing in our area, right down the street. You got to know that. So fear was a normal emotion. You should have it. You were stupid if you didn't. In any case, I walked toward him, and he wanted to know when the church would, when the school would be open. He wanted to enroll his children. And I looked over to the right. There was his wife and his 2 children. Okay, he was a good man, just looking for information. And I told him where the pastor lived, and that was that. And I walked over to the car, and the trunk of the car was open. My father was standing by him. My mother was standing by the door. And I walked over to him. He said, "What did that guy want?" He didn't use any racist language. "What did that guy want?" I said, "Pop, I know where his kids can go to school." "Oh, okay." I looked down. That shotgun that is on my mantle was sitting right there. That's a true story. My father was going to shoot him. If that guy touched me, he was a dead man. It's about mine. My father was about to give up the last of his years of life in prison to keep me from being hurt. That's fidelity. That's fidelity. That shotgun represents absolute fidelity. That man was never going to touch me. That was never going to happen. My father would have given his life for mine. That was just one instance of a number where I knew, and looking back, that my father was willing to trade his life for mine. Yeah, that's a true story. See? That's what you remember at Christmas. You may remember the gifts. You remember the holly and all the good things. That's so wonderful, but I remember fidelity. See? And I remember that because that's Stephen Martyr. He was faithful to the gospel. It cost him his life. I remember the Holy Innocents. They suffered innocently. And only in Easter does all of that make sense, because it makes sense in hope that nothing is final except Christ himself, that all good things live forevermore in Christ. We live together in Christ. But I said to my little Sarah, Sarah, there is no paradise without you. There is no paradise with mom and dad, and those whom we have loved and been loved by. Christmas has to eventuate in Easter. Or frankly, it's an incomplete statement of love. It's the cross that gives us its meaning.